Blog Talk Radio.
Everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and it's another great Thursday evening here, May 7th of 2015. I got a great show for you tonight. Got a couple of guys joining me here in just a second on the Coach's Corner panel, and then a little bit later on, I've got a special guest that'll be joining me for a little bit of an interview towards the end of the program. But thanks for tuning in. I just want to remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Central. The easiest way to reach us, if you haven't found us yet, is go to blogtalkradio.com, and you can go up into the search key and type Golf Talk Live, and that will get you to the show. And if you happen to miss the show and not able to tune in live, not a problem. Visit this link, www.blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, and that will take you to this page as well. And what you can do is just scroll down. If you've missed the live broadcast and you want to tune in a little bit later, you can scroll down and hit the on-demand section, and that will give you the most recent shows, most current shows in that order, in a descending order, and you can listen to them at your leisure at that point. So certainly appreciate you, for those of you that are able to join us live every week, and for those of you not, thank you as well for at least joining in and listening to the programs, and I appreciate the feedback that many of you have given me as well. Always helps to, as I always mentioned to one of the guests coming on here, it's always great to get some of that feedback to see whether or not I'm going in the right direction with the program or not. But anyways, also if you want to speak to any of the guests at any point during the broadcast, you're certainly welcome to. You can call in, and the phone number is area code 646-716-4667. Again, that number is 646-716-4667. Or if you have questions or comments about the program, you can email me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And also, if you're interested in coming on the program, either to be an interviewed guest, or if you're interested in maybe joining in on the Coach's Corner, I think we still got a few slots available throughout the year. You can also reach me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. Also, I update on social media every week about the program, as well as the Women of Golf Show, my other program that airs Tuesday mornings that is at 9 a.m. Eastern Time with co-host Cindy Miller, who's an LPGA professional and also a member of the Legends Tour. Go to facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog, and you can get us there as well. You can find out all the information, and the links are there. And also, while you're there, please appreciate if you'd like the page while you're visiting there. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. That's CEOs in capital letters. You can follow me on Twitter and also update the program there as well. But again, thank you everybody for tuning in this week, and I hope you're going to enjoy the show as I know you do most of the time, and we're going to try and do a good job tonight for you as well. As I mentioned, we're starting off with Coach's Corner, and two great guys I got joining me tonight, Trent Warner and Todd Elliott. Let me just tell you a little bit about them, and then but first let me just also remind you that a little bit later in the show I'm going to be interviewing Leigh Taylor, who is a PGA Master Professional, who teaches out of Golf Galaxy Devon in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. He actually called in several months ago with another guest, and enjoyed listening to the programs and wanted to come on as a guest as well. So we're going to talk to him a little bit later about club fitting and some of the other areas of golf that don't normally cover on here, but I want to give him an opportunity to talk about it since he specializes in that, among other things. But let me just refresh your memory on these two guys. They've been on the program before, but let me just remind you. Trent Warner, of course, he was rated as number one teacher in Colorado by both his peers and Golf Digest magazine. He's also now a Golf Channel Academy coach who will be seen on the Golf Channel as well as regularly on Altitude Sports Television's Golf at Altitude. And he's also author of a great book, Golf Scrimmages, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about that as well because I got a couple of questions I want to ask him. And also he's going to be joining us, but also Todd Elliott, who's head professional at Hideaway Beach Club for the last a couple of years, I guess now he's been there. And he's also TPI Golf Mechanic Level 2 certified, as well as Titleist certified fitter and staff member, and Couture certified fitter, as well as a golf writer for Coastal Breeze newspaper in Marco Island. Gentlemen, welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ted.
Not a problem. Trent, I see you snuck in right under the wire. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Listen, guys, as I always say to all of my guests, I appreciate you guys giving of your time. I know it's a long stretch here, and I know you guys have busy days, and I appreciate you giving your time as well as you have. So thank you very much. And Trent, let me just start off very quickly, and then I want to talk to you a little bit more about that a little bit later. But Trent has also taken, as I mentioned, he wrote a great book called Golf Scrimmages. And Trent, just take a minute. You've got a website now that's is up and running. I know you had me take a look at it. Very good. I love the videos particularly. But you want to just talk very quickly, and then I'll let you have some more time a little bit later in the show, just about the new website.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. The whole premise, basically, I put a book together. It's probably been 9 years, and fortunately it's still cranking pretty well. But we decided, and I can remember when I was writing it 9 years ago, I always wanted to turn this into more of an electronic version somehow, and not just an e-book is not what I mean by that, but an actual website where people go and they can see the games, either a video or a text description, and enter scores from those games. So, and what's so important about that is it's kind of the second part of practice. It's one of the steps along the way that we need to take, and it's about competitive, realistic, golf-like practice as opposed to just standing there trying to hit positions or swing stuff all the time. And we have a lot of success at our academy with great amateurs and juniors and a few local mini tour players, and really striking a nice balance between improving your technique so that you can control the ball, but shifting gears and saying, just because you can hit your 7-iron a billion times in a row on the range, it doesn't mean anything. So that's kind of it's just competitive golf-like practice, and it's really striking a chord in a great way with a lot of professionals, coaches of a team, and great players.
Well, and I really like it too because, as you said, it really puts a whole different spin on practice. And I can tell you, I love going to the range and or going to a practice facility, and I can sit and hit balls all day long. I enjoy it. I love the game of golf. But I find sometimes if you do certain things, it can get a little bit repetitive. It gets a little bit boring. So it's kind of nice to do something. And I like the games, and we'll give you the information for those listening to the program tonight a little bit later on where they can go and what they have to do. But I highly recommend those that don't have a copy of the book, get a copy of the book. But for those of you who have it, if you haven't been to the site yet, as I said, we'll give that information out a little bit. Go check it out. I think it's going to be a great tool that you can use and encourage your students to get involved with as well, and really have a lot of fun with them. I really like the games, Trent, is the bottom line. Is I think some of the games are fun, and I'm going to start implementing more of them into not just the teaching side, but into my own personal practice. I think they're a lot of fun. But so thank you for doing that, and we'll talk a little bit more a little bit later in the program. Todd, I'm going to let you go first, just since I had a moment here with Trent. What I did is as I was explaining to Todd Trent off air a few moments ago, is I've got some general questions that have come into the show, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about practice, a little more in depth. I'm going to read some things out and then get you guys to respond. But the first question I got, Todd, and I'm going to let you start with this one here, is a gentleman wrote into the show and he said that I know I can carry 14 clubs, but which 14? How do I decide which clubs to put in my bag? So let's sort of put things in perspective. I mean, we have the option of carrying 14 clubs. Some of them, obviously, we definitely want to have in our bag. But let's look at it from the perspective, number one, how does a player let's start with a higher handicap, maybe a 20-plus handicap, and then maybe somebody a little bit lower handicap. And let's talk about what they should most commonly have in their golf bag, and can they make changes depending on the circumstances from one round to another. So, Todd, if you want to start with that, and then Trent, I'll get you to jump in as well.
Yep. Sure. The higher handicappers, which you discuss, first of all, easy answer is to get fit by a fitting professional, somebody who's studied how to fit and fits for a living, maybe not full time, but fits in some way for a living. But the options really for the handicap, it's definitely in the longer clubs, is loft. Usually, and I say usually, there's always exceptions, but let's just say generally, your higher handicappers are going to want more loft. I hardly ever have a higher handicapper hitting a 3-wood. So when they usually say, I want to lesson with my 3-wood, and I watch them hit it a couple times, I say, well, if you leave it at home in the garage, that would probably be best. And then we go from there. Because it's hard. It's hard to hit off the ground. And if they choose to hit it off the tee, if they like it enough to tee a lot, okay, maybe they can keep it in for those special shots. But, it just doesn't happen a lot. So I used to go 5-wood at minimum, with especially off the ground for a higher handicapper, and maybe even a 7-wood. And then the driver usually is going to have a little bit more loft too, more around the 12 and 13 because of the balls that we have, the golf balls we have today. And, the way the club is made, we like to launch it high. The ball doesn't have as much spin. So, again, loft is your friend. And then, as many head covers as you can get. As many fairway woods and hybrids as you can get. Minimal amount of irons, usually around 7. Maybe a 6-iron, but usually around 7. And then we definitely want all the way to the wedge, and then sand wedge. Now the wedges, the loft on the wedge now is 45. And I believe probably 30 years ago it was around 50 to 51. So you're talking about a 6-degree difference there. So now you've got a 56-degree wedge, sand wedge, and you got a 45-degree wedge. That's 11 degrees of difference, and you got to fill that. So we try to get a gap wedge in there. Even though I like loft up top, I don't like a ton of wedges, usually for the higher handicappers. But, there's always exceptions, But I like a lot of head covers and loft up top in the longer clubs, and got to have that gap wedge for sure.
Yeah, and great points. Trent, let me ask you, one of the things, too, that I think that the average golfer really needs to first understand is the distances that they're hitting their clubs first off. So they know, as Todd had mentioned, with their 7-iron, how far on an average are they hitting? So they need to establish that. I think that's critical to understand, have some general yardages. I mean, they may not be able to get it pinpointed exactly, and they don't need to at that level. But that's certainly an important area. But in your estimation, from your experience, what do you think are some critical areas? If somebody's going to load up their golf bag with 14 clubs, what would you like to see for a higher handicapper, and then obviously for maybe a little better player, what do you normally try to guide them or help them with?
Yeah, I think on both ends of the spectrum there, as far as ability levels, we kind of use a phrase called you need to have playable trajectories, so something that can land on a green and stop relatively soon, or hold a green. And then you need to be able to have distance gaps, so correct yardages between each clubs. And I think it's important for, and again, there are certainly exceptions, but a higher handicap, maybe someone that doesn't produce a lot of swing speed, even just using every other club is terribly beneficial. It's really good. So like a sand wedge, a pitching wedge, an 8, and maybe a 6, and a few woods. And as Todd alluded to, some putting the loft in those longer ones is critical. And same thing really with a better player. They still have to have playable trajectories, and swing speed has tons to do with that. And some of them spin it too much, so it gets more fine tuning with shafts and matching swings to tweaking a little bit with the swing, I guess, tweaking a little bit with shafts or lofts or different, even club heads make the ball travel a little bit higher or lower. But along the lines that you brought up with yardages, I think it's really important for each player to not only understand that the game can be pretty challenging, and you don't always hit the club, exactly that golden yardage that you've done before. It's not always a best shot. So, like you said, kind of an average, and we really train our players to have a range, and that there's going to be some overlap, and that overlap is beneficial to you, because then you start to think about strategy, and if you're in between clubs but the trouble is behind the green, then you grab the shorter club, and vice versa if the trouble is short of the green. But so it starts to spur on some strategy and thinking and engaging your mind a little bit. And as you get better, certainly those yardage gaps or those ranges get smaller. But I mean, it doesn't matter what your name is. If you miss-hit a 7-iron, your 8-iron could probably, a good 8-iron, go farther than that bad 7-iron. So everybody does that.
Yeah, and I think too, I kind of agree a little bit with what Todd said as far as having a bunch of wedges in the bag. I think certainly the pros a lot of do, and I think we all know that started really back early on in Tom Kite's career. He was one of the first ones that really started loading up his golf bag with, I think, 4 wedges at one time, and that was where he did his best and scored. I mean, he was not a super long hitter, so. And in his day when he was a little bit younger than that, they were still hitting a lot of persimmon woods. They had the introduction of metal woods, but they certainly didn't have the abilities that they do now. But I think that one of the things that I would express to especially the higher handicap players, and Todd, you sort of alluded to this, I think sometimes if you're going to get rid of a club, a 3-wood is probably a good club to get rid of, unless you're terrible with your drives and you've got a low lofted driver. You might want to keep that 3-wood just because it's a higher loft and just use it purely for teeing off, maybe give you a little bit more accuracy. But for most of the high handicappers, that 3-wood, trying to hit it off the deck, for a second shot, maybe in a par 5, it's just not going to happen for most of them. I've watched them out in the not even just in the range, but even out in the golf course, and they're all over the place. So it's one of those things that sometimes you have to take. And same with the long irons. If you're carrying a 2-iron or 3-iron, even a 4-iron, and you're not at least, in my opinion, probably about a 10, or maybe I'll be generous and be a 12 handicap or better, get them out of your bag. Because you don't need, there's no business having it in the golf bag. That's my opinion. Agree, disagree? Any extra thoughts? Either one?
No. I
go ahead, Todd. All right. I was just gonna agree completely with the 3-wood scenario. That is, it's the least lofted club that you hit off the ground, and it's for that reason it's the most challenging. So I agree. It depends on how often you need to hit it off of a tee. Probably the first club that should leave your bag, if anything. And then with regard to the long iron, I think it's true. Just I don't know if I'd go necessarily on handicap level, but maybe just swing speed, but that kind of dictates how high the ball travels and how far. And it's everything, as Todd alluded to, has gotten so strong lofted that your 3-iron today is like yesteryear's 1-iron. And so on and so forth. So your 5-iron today looks like yesteryear's 3-iron, and when I tell a kid to pull a middle iron out of their bag these days, they grab like a 9, and that's different, right, than what we all grew up with. Most people are grabbing a 6 or maybe a 7, but that's so true. And obviously to load up the bag with the clubs that you want. There's a lot of factors involved, and we're certainly not going to be able to give anybody specifically a tried or true
answer to that. It's really up to the individual, and I strongly recommend for those of you that are working with a teach professional, if you haven't already done so through their assessment, really find out, especially if you're new with the instructor, talk to them about getting, sort of dialing in on what you're hitting with each club, and then sort of make an assessment from there as to which clubs you can get out of the bag. Because sometimes there's too much overlap, like we talked about earlier with the wedges. I mean, for some of the high handicappers, they don't need 4 wedges in their bag necessarily. They certainly don't need to have an 11-degree gap, but at the same time, they don't necessarily, they're not hitting every shot that the pros are hitting. I know some of them try, but I just think that sometimes there's other choices that they could be better suited for. But great answers, guys. I want to move on to the next one. And Trent, I'm going to let you start off with this question here. Good old thin shot. Gentleman wrote in and said that he's catching his irons thin and wants to know what causes it. So let's talk about what some of the causes of hitting a thin shot are, and what some of the ways that you do in your teaching to help avoid that, get them back on track.
Yeah. Did he say what handicap he is, or just
no? He didn't.
In general,
no,
just thin shots. Okay, yeah.
They never do.
Yeah.
They never do.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. And the reason is there's obviously multiple reasons, and
Sure.
and the first thing I check is that, I mean, outside of some really fundamental setup issues, let's just say those are pretty solid. Typically, changing spine angle either on the backswing or the downswing, so it really needs to learn to rotate without standing up. And sometimes it's the opposite. Like a person does something like they hang back on their back foot, let's just say, and that would cause a chunk shot. If they were kind of a robot and we programmed them to hang back on their back foot, they chunk it every time. But human beings being a lot smarter, we do something to not chunk it, and very well maybe standing up because he's about ready to chunk it, and therefore he hits the majority of his shots thin. But I would really kind of concentrate on like spine angle and shifting weight, and we I think find a lot of success sometimes in getting outside the body. So instead of thinking about the technical aspect that I just brought up, just make some divots, in the ground after the golf ball. So put some tees down or something as a marker basically next to your practice swing, and start ripping some turf out, on the left side or on the front side of after side of that golf ball or coin or tee or whatever it is, and your body's going to learn stuff pretty well with a pretty solid intention. And sometimes you don't have to know what it is that you did. Did I stay down better? Did I turn better? And a lot of that stuff takes shape when you give it a good solid picture or image or intention, like just ripping out some turf.
Yeah, and that's true. And Todd, typically hitting thin shots, as Trent had talked about as well, typically, and more often not, most cases, is a lot of times the golfers on maybe too flat of a swing plane. They're hitting it, more of around their body. And also, too, one of the other common causes of hitting thin shots is lifting up through impact, which is, again, much like Trent talked about, sort of going back on that back foot causes you to lift up out of your posture, and ultimately you're either digging deep in behind the ball or you're hitting it thin. So what are some things, is there anything differently or in addition to that what Trent just talked about that maybe you do to work with your students when they're hitting shots a little bit thin? Any drills or things that you do to help them?
Well, Trent stole my answer, so no, I think he's spot on with all that. I love putting I just, you can put a line in the ground. I scrape the ground with a tee. I make a line like that and have them hit in front. But I definitely think, definitely people are coming up and extending, but they're just doing it at the wrong time. When partially one part of, when they can hit it thin. And then obviously he talked about when they're on their back foot, bottom out too early, and then the club is coming, bottoms out and comes up, misses the ground but comes up and hits it thin. I think those are all, very, very good points. A lot of that, I'll just take it in a different direction when,
Sure.
Physical evaluation on the students. just to, grow on what he said. I totally agree with all that he said. But a physical evaluation on the students, maybe they're extending early because they can't stay in that posture or, press against the ground as well as they should. Maybe they're hanging back because of internal rotation of their hip. So I think, a physical evaluation on the student would help the cause for sure. But, some motor pattern things like, again, I think he said the best. You scrape a line on the ground and you want to hit a little bit in front line. That's the best for somebody hanging back, I think. And somebody extending forward, there's a lot of, extending too soon. There's a lot of things, a lot of reasons that happens, but a lot of times it's overactive legs. So you try to get I put something in between their legs, maybe a shoe box in between their legs, and have them rotate their or a little bit more, and that gets the legs to stop and their glutes coming from up under them. That's another way of correcting the early extension, we call it. So, but yeah, definitely want to see how that person is physically and see if they can make the move that I want them to make.
Well, and great answers, both of you. And I think that the other thing, as you were just talking about on the physical side, a lot of times too, maybe some good stretching can help as well. I think a lot of times golfers that maybe aren't as in good shape have a lot of tension in their body, and ultimately, if they're not sort of loose or in good shape, a lot of times that tension will creep up at the most inopportune time, like when they're swinging at the golf ball. And more often than not, what ends up ultimately happening is they end up coming out of their posture because their muscles are tight and not allowing them to really have a fluid motion with the golf swing. So certainly take a look at their physical, and it's not just their shape or size, but their flexibility. I think flexibility is extremely important in golf. You have to have, certainly you don't have to be the most flexible, but you have to have some flexibility and maybe some good stretching, stretching exercise and things like that to loosen up, particularly before you start a practice session. Great answers, guys. We got another gentleman that had written in as well. His problem is not hitting thin shots, but he's hitting some shanks. It's one that we don't hear of a lot, as much as we do some of the other ones. But traditionally, obviously, shanks are caused by the hands moving a little bit too close to the ball than normal at impact. Trent, what do you recommend for those hitting too many shanks?
Yeah, I think first one is just make sure you're not too close to the ball. Start with that one. Always the easy stuff. You'd rather hit it after you hit it like way out on the toe. That feels very dreamy compared to that hosel. So move away. The other options, like you said, is basically the hands or the handle and therefore the club are moving out away from the golfer. So certainly, like Todd alluded to with some of the standing up issues, standing up kind of means that you're moving out of your posture and your hips are moving close to the ball, and therefore there's no room for your hands. So that now you've got to move your hands out, and then that moves the hosel into it. So staying more back, rear end against, tilt your golf bag over and keep your rear end against your irons as you hit shots. Is a good one to keep your weight back into your heels, especially your left heel, kind of through impact. Giving your hands more room to stay closer into your thighs, basically, as it swings through impact. The other common one that kind of sneaks in there is when people tend to cast the club a little bit or unhinge a little bit too soon. That would cause a chunk shot, and in an effort not to chunk it, the club barely drifts outward in an effort to find room, to find space. And it nicks the hosel or hits the hosel as well. So that one's a little bit more of, you need to make sure that the club face is not open at any point, either from a bad grip or a backswing or a downswing, and really getting the face square and hitting a lot of kind of lowish punch shots to lead with the hand so that you're not having to flip it or scoop it.
Right. What are some of the things I think that talking about posture here, and I know we don't have the benefit of showing everybody what we're talking about, so they're going to have to sort of use a little bit of imagination. But one of the things that that people don't understand, they're either getting too close or too far. For your irons, your woods are a little bit different, but for your irons, generally, what's the rule of thumb for an average golfer an average height golfer to have their arms, should they be sort of hanging straight below their shoulders? Should their hands be a little outside of their shoulders? Ahead of their shoulders, or should they be tucked in a little closer? What's the sort of the general rule of thumb when setting up to hit a good shot?
I know this is a little bit sarcastic, but it really is true. It's the one that makes them hit it in the center of the face. I had people that I've put marker on the club and I realized they're hitting it on the heel, and I got them so far away from the ball it looked scary. Now the ball is hitting the middle of the club and it's going straight where it's supposed to, and it all works out. Now, in the middle of the swing change, could that change a little bit? Yeah, but it really is wherever it makes them hit in the center of the face, and hopefully you can make changes after that. But I like to move them closer or farther away depending on where they're hitting the face right away, so they can at least see some good shots, and then we can kind of work on their swing. That's just my method.
What tends to be, guys, the more common? Do most golfers tend to be too close to the ball, and conversely, their hands are a little more close to their body, or do sort of the average golfers, do you think they stand too far away from the ball, and more often not, or is it about even?
I would say it's probably pretty close. I'd say they may get a little too close, but it's mainly because of poor posture. So they get the rear end tucked underneath them, and they get really hunched over, and that kind of makes the hands sit low and close to their legs. Sometimes they don't actually need to move farther away. They just need to get their spine straighter and their chest open and their shoulders back, and all of a sudden there is room in there now. But I guess just because you'd rather hit it a little bit on the toe than any bit on that hosel, I'd just kind of tell people more that you'd rather be too far away than too close.
Yeah, I agree with that. This one's again is sort of a generic question that was sent in, but it's a question that really, I think, in this day and age with so much equipment, and in this case golf balls out there, the gentleman wrote in and wants to know, how do I know what ball I should be playing? Because there's literally so many out there on the shelves, and I know a certain amount of it is a personal thing, and there's really no try and true method, but a lot of the ball manufacturers want you to really focus on how you're handling the ball around the greens. How does it handle on the greens? I think really with the driver, it's not as big of an issue because most balls, within reason, are kind of going generally the same distance if you're hitting it. But I think it's how it reacts around the greens. But Todd, let me start with you this time on this. How do you advise if somebody comes up and says to you at your facility, what balls should I be playing? Does it make a difference? What's generally your rule of thumb on that?
Well, and again, this sounds like sarcasm, but my first question is, how much are you willing to spend? Because I think a lot of the advertising, companies have to sell the balls that don't cost as much. So when a Titleist promotes a Pro V1, they can promote it a certain way, but then when they promote a Pinnacle, they're not going to say, well, it's not as good as the Pro V1, but it's cheaper.
Sure.
That's not what they're going to tell you in a 30-second ad. But that's the truth. I ask them how much they want to spend, and if they say, well, I don't have any limits, then I'm going to tell them they're going to want the premium ball within that family. So let's say Titleist, because I'm a Titleist man, I'll go with them.
Sure.
It's really going to be between a Pro V1 and a Pro V1X. And so we are going to go to the green, like you said, around the green. We're going to hit some pitch shots, and then we're going to hit some chip shots. So between, one step off the green to 30 yards off the green. And then we might hit some hybrids into the green to see, or their longest iron, and see how that holds. And it really is, can they stop the ball? And if they can, how do they feel? So it becomes the player's decision at that point. But really, the premium ball is a premium price for a reason, and it is the best ball around the greens, and it's usually going to be one of the better balls with a driver as well. And then when we get down into a different price range, it's the same, like between an NXT Tour and an NXT. You're going to have the same thing. I'm not sure why anybody would hit an NXT because it's going to, it really bounces off the green, but, everybody has their feel. It really comes down to a feel thing if it's close enough. But the premium ball, unlike most 30-second ads, is the best ball for everybody, or one of them at least.
Yeah. Well, and Trent, how much does conditions of the course play into, and obviously courses, depending on where you are in the country and what your general climate is, but obviously there's some courses, maybe if you're playing down here in Florida a lot, you're dealing with different types of grass than maybe what you might be up in say, where you are in Colorado or some of the other areas where, you might be playing on a different type of grass, but also maybe the greens might be a little firmer just because of the climate change and also elevation change. How much do those factors play into ball selection for some of the golfers, and what do you sort of recommend from that standpoint as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe a tough one actually. There's no doubt that like elevation plays a big part in how the golf ball reacts, and I would say that probably more golfers, they're just going to stick with the ball that they're used to or playing, and I'm thinking of better players.
Sure.
And they're just going to kind of learn what it does, but we've got a problem here in Colorado, and that no matter where else we go in the country, pretty much the ball goes shorter, and it's not very much fun. So when I just had a kid a couple hours ago, a great young man, he was just down in Florida and noticed the ball was plugging a lot more with his driver, not rolling out, and yet here in Colorado it sails. So, of course, we kind of fit for where he's playing most of the time, which is here. And at elevation, so wherever you are in the country, if you're at a higher elevation, the ball loses its spin faster off in the air, and so it doesn't spin back a lot in Colorado. It doesn't, so it rolls out, and we need a little bit more spin here in Colorado to keep it afloat, to keep it in the air, and then you take that same thing fitting, whether it's a ball and clubs and sap, and you take that to Florida, and now the thing spins too much. So it is a tricky one, and I don't think there were a lot of that when the tour used to come here to Castle Pines Golf Club, a great club about 10 minutes away from us. I think it was a struggle for a lot of tour players because they hit they were elevated tees, and they're already at 7,000 feet down there in Castle Rock and Castle Pines, and they feel like they don't have any control over the golf ball. It's just in the air forever, and they don't know what's going to happen to it. So it's totally different for each person. But I don't know if I answered your question exactly.
Yep.
Other than it does react a lot differently, and there's a great ball that's kind of middle of the road ball that's not too expensive and not the hard rock ones that Todd was alluding to. But TaylorMade puts out a ball called a Project A. And it's a very good price point, and it's very good for, just kind of the middle range golfers that like to hit it a little farther and yet have some good spin around the green. It's a really good ball.
Yeah, and I again, great answers, both of you. I look at a couple of factors when I advise when I have a student or somebody, even if they're not a student, comes up and says, Ted, what should I be playing, or I go to Dick's or what have you, and I'm looking at all these balls and I don't know which ones to buy, and I ask them a couple of questions. Say, first off, much as Todd does, what's their price point? What are they comfortable playing? Is one question I'm going to ask them. The other question is I'm going to ask, if I don't already know, is basically how good of a player. What's their handicap? What are they consistently shooting? Because in my mind, if you're not a good player, and I mean not a good player at all, maybe a 25-plus handicap, I'm going to disagree in one aspect with you, Todd, and that is I agree that, ball from ball for the most part are pretty much the same, and a lot of it is advertising. But at the same time, if you've got a very high handicap person, I'm not going to put them into a Pro V or a Pro V1 or Pro V1X, only because they're expensive and he or she is going to be losing them in the woods all the time. Now, it's great for the guy coming up behind if he saw where it went, because he's going to get himself a brand new golf ball. But for some of the higher handicappers, within reason, settle for a little lesser price point golf ball. There's some great golf balls out there, of which you guys have mentioned already. But, you don't need to be spending, $40, $50, $60 for a dozen golf balls if you're not a good player. If money's no object to you and you don't care if you lose, a dozen around, then so be it. All you're doing is you're feeding the fish in the ponds, and you're helping the guy that maybe can't afford $60 worth of golf balls that's following you behind, as I said, and watching you. But those are areas that I look at. But Trent, you raised some interesting points as well. It also depends on where you're playing. Heat is another factor. If you're playing in a climate that's maybe like in Arizona where it's hot a lot, that's certainly going to affect the ball flight to a certain degree as well. If you're playing in Florida here, as you said, Trent, you may not need a golf ball that has this maybe high spin rate, only because the greens tend to be a little bit more forgiving. But if you're playing in a course say in the Northeast or in your area in the Midwest, a little bit where the greens are not as forgiving and not as receptive, then you're going to want maybe a ball that has a little bit more a higher spin rate, just to give you a little bit of extra edge, if you will, in playing in some of that. And also, you've got to factor in, as you said, with elevation. Elevation is going to certainly change. So there's a lot of factors to look at. But I think, as you indicated, Todd, I think as a general rule, if you're playing in the same area all the time, and if you're a pretty decent golfer, then I would find a golf ball that you like, and whether it's if you're a Titleist man or TaylorMade, I think it doesn't really matter. Just what is your price point?
Absolutely.
Is how I would look at it. The last question I'm going to ask, and then we're going to go into a little bit about the practice, is this individual, and I don't know, to be honest, whether it was male or female. They didn't give a name. They just said that they don't feel like they're hitting their max distance with their clubs, and they've been told that breathing can affect. And one of the things that a lot of people have come to understand here, and most amateurs don't realize, is that you need to exhale. A lot of amateur golfers, as you guys probably have experienced over the years, for some reason tend to hold their breath during the downswing, which is really not the proper way to hit a golf shot. So let's just very briefly talk about that, and then I want to get into the practice. Todd, I'm going to let you start off with that.
Sure. I'm not an expert on breathing, other than I know it's very important. I think a lot of people have discussed different ways on how to breathe, but the most of what I've heard is that, a small breath in and a long exhale out. Right. Through some yoga that I've done, there's different breathing exercises where you can do, alternative nostril breathing, which I would have a hard time explaining. But there's a lot of things out there, pretty much like you said. As long as you're breathing, you're doing better than not breathing. However you do it. But it's something that I'll just speak on about myself. When I'm playing a tournament golf and trying to get a little bit better at it as I've become, got in the profession. Breathing is important, and you got to have a routine. And your routine behind the ball and over the ball should include how you're breathing. I think it's very, very important. And whatever you're studying or however you do it, you gotta master it, and it's got to be part of your routine, because you can't be thinking about it. You don't want to be thinking about your breath when you're doing it. But but if you do it enough, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, it's got to be natural. Let me just expand a little bit, and then Trent, I want you to weigh in a little bit as well. If you think of other sports, weightlifters, for instance, when bench pressing, or tennis players, sometimes you'll hear them sort of grunting. Basically, what they're doing is the exhaling. And we had a great guest on the Women of Golf show here a few weeks back, Catherine Roberts, who obviously is very big into yoga. Talks about how the exhaling relaxes the muscles and allows you to sort of free up everything and allow you to sort of give it everything you've got. And one of the things, Trent, I think you'll probably agree with me on this, is that when you hold your breath during your swing, you're going to increase the chances that tension is going to creep in and your muscles are going to get tense, and then you're not going to have a sort of free flowing motion. Is there anything that you do to try and for yourself, number one, and also for your students, to try and sort of help regulate your breathing during a round?
Yeah, that's great. I think it all kind of gets wrapped into your routine, and just one key word that we all need in this game is just awareness of what we're feeling, what our thoughts are, where our mind's going. And when you breathe, you're kind of sending a signal to your body like, I'm cool, everything's all right, we're good here, we're all right. And when you don't, you send a whole bunch of signals down that start freaking out. And anytime that you're fearful, angry, mad, there's research that it's not going to get better; it's going to get worse. So breathing is crucial, and I think it kind of has to do with hanging out there in your back behind the ball when you're in line with it, sure. and just taking a few, like what Todd said, a few little breaths in and a longer exhale out, just to relax yourself and kind of be patient. Like this is my shot, and I've got a student. I love what he says. Wherever the ball goes, he says his basically his commitment trigger to before he swings is I got to honor this shot, and it doesn't matter if it's in the weeds or if it's for an 8 or for a birdie. I'm going to honor this because it deserves all my attention and all my relaxation and everything. So just a few breaths back behind it, and it just needs to be incorporated in with whatever else the person does, whether it's visual or a little kinesthetic kind of sensation, a little bit in their routine.
Yeah, well said, guys. I mean, it's something that and the reason why I wanted to put these questions in here is a lot of people don't think about things like breathing and that it's important, but it really is important because it's not just a matter of what keeps us going every day, but it also allows a lot of tension. I know when I was younger, my father was sort of showing me the ropes in golf, and that's really who taught me how to play initially. I would sort of be one of those golfers, especially when I was a kid. You kind of hold your breath, and your forearms are looking like Popeye here, and you're bulging. The muscles are bulging, and he'd say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to hit this shot." And he said, "Yeah, but you haven't taken a breath in the last." He said, "You're starting to turn blue." And he said, "You've got a death grip on that golf club," and so forth. So I got to give my father credit. He knew what he was doing, but that's what happens with a lot of amateurs, and you can see it all the time. So breathing is very important, and there's a lot of great people out there. And Todd, as you alluded to, yoga is a great way of helping to relax. And I think that it's not just about exercising, lifting weights and things like that. There's a lot of great exercises out there that don't involve weights at all, but involve technique and help you create a good breathing pattern. And it certainly is good to not only get in touch with a great swing coach, but also somebody, whether you do it online, follow it online or research it that way. There's a lot of good breathing techniques or take a yoga class and just learn how to breathe properly. And I think you'll find that your golf game will actually improve because you're going to release a lot of that tension, which we all from time to time bring to the golf course. Great answers, guys. I want to just take a few moments here. I don't want to get into too long of a thing about the practice because I know we've talked about it before, but just a couple of things I want to hit on here and give you each a chance to respond to it. I'm going to read some things out and give you guys a chance to respond, as I said, and then we'll wrap it up. There's really kind of 4 laws of what I consider to be perfect practice. Deliberate practice is obviously something that's highly personalized, but what you need to work on is really unique to the individual golfers. For everyday golfers, understanding how to practice in a way that leads to actual improvement is really what the ultimate goal is here. So they need a personalized plan, and that's sort of going to stretch them through their comfort zone. And really, it's up, again, to the individual, but also to their golf teacher. So, Trent, let me just start back with you, and then Todd. What can an instructor do? How can an instructor help create a good plan for their student in order to make effective practice that's going to give them a better chance at success?
Yeah, you bet. The first thing we do is you just can't go on any further in a lesson with someone unless they understand why it is they see their ball doing what it does. Why does it do what it does, or and what do I need to do to get it better? Obviously, so kind of that step. And then the second step is, okay, I get it, and now you got to go work some sort of plan, and you have to kick the tires on some things and ad-lib a little bit sometimes with players, and lots of times there are options, and you find out what works the best for that player in that second step of just really intentional, just like you're talking about, deliberate practice. And we like to add on to that, like they have to know that they're doing it and not just hitting golf balls, which is what typically happens if you go to look at any driving range around the country. People are just whacking golf balls, and they're not They don't have any purpose or structure. So to know that they're doing it comes in the form of some sort of feedback device, a tool, a training aid. Everybody has a video camera in their pocket these days with phones and apps.
Sure.
Any of those things, a mirror, all that stuff. And then we always kind of break into the next step, which is, even if they're not hitting it great, we want the player to kind of move into the transfer practice step, which is those competitive practice games.
Right. Well said. Todd, the other part, second part of it is really deliberate practice should push you beyond your abilities. So that's something too. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I think that a lot of players make, especially your higher handicap and your high ante, your amateurs. Tend to stick with what they're comfortable with. If they're good hitting, their 6, 7, 8 irons, that's what they're going to hit 9 times out of 10 on the range. If there's somebody that's pretty decent putter and maybe not too bad, pretty good wedge player, but they're terrible at other aspects of the game, then they tend to gravitate what they're comfortable with. So, what are some things that you're doing with some of the people you're working with at your facility to help sort of push them beyond their abilities?
Well, I think everybody's different, and you just have to, obviously you have to talk to them about their game and what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, and that's what you're working on, and have them practice on what they're not doing very well, just like you said. Now, there does come a balance to that because you want the person to have confidence, and if they're really struggling with something and they're really struggling during their practice, well, you don't want them to just keep doing that. But, hopefully what they're doing makes them a little bit better. So there has to be a balance. I mean, you do have to hit some 7 irons at a target if that's your favorite club. You do have to hit that every practice session and feel that confidence.
Sure.
But at the same time, you got to have some quick practice on things that you're really struggling with. It should be short. It should be quick. It should be, like you said, deliberate of
Sure.
exactly what you're working on. Hit a couple good ones, and then once you hit a couple good ones and you feel exactly what maybe I've said or what we've worked on or some discovery of what you feel in that move, and then, move right on to something else.
Yeah, and I agree with that totally as well. The other part of it is, the third part is once you've sort of established and you've got that deliberate practice, and once you've got a game plan set up, really to become a better golfer. And the truth of the matter is, as we've all said over the years, practice, practice, practice. It has to be repeated at a high volume. And let me just explain that, because I don't want any confusion, not only here in the panel, but also with those tuning into the broadcast. What I mean by high volume is not going to the range and just beating ball after ball after ball, but there has to be a certain frequency in the practice that you're going to do. And once you've got a game plan down and you've got an effective practice routine, you have to be willing to put the time and an effort in. If you ever want to get better, going once every couple of weeks or even once a week is certainly going to help. It's going to keep you going a little bit, but there's ways that you can go without having to drive across town to the range or going to the golf course that you can practice as well. There's things you can do within your house. If you can't make it to the range because of time restraint every week, that's fine. Find other ways to mimic some of that practice within your house. Get a full-length mirror. You can pick one of those up fairly cheap at your local hardware store and use that as a way of, practicing, standing in front of the mirror and practicing your different positions as far as your swing and so forth. So there's a lot of things that you can do out in the backyard. You can get some of those wiffle balls, and so you're not hitting, busting up any windows. So that's one thing as well. Trent, what is your thoughts on sort of practicing at a higher volume?
Yeah, I think it's imperative that the person maintains their focus through the plan that's been created by their coach. And we often do kind of small number of golf balls, and then we switch clubs. So we might do, I'll just say 10 golf balls working on whatever it is, really focused in a really deliberate manner. And in between those 10 golf balls, there's 2, 3, 4, or 5 practice swings. And when they do that, it really makes that one golf ball that's sitting there more important and more successful. And then they jump back and they do those 2, 3, 4 practice swings again and hit the second shot. And they do that for 10 golf balls. And once those 10 golf balls are gone, get a drink of water, change clubs, and you're cruising along. You're making an improvement. But again, it's important that they know that they're doing the move, whatever it is in their setup or swing that helps the ball travel better.
Well said. And the last one is deliberate practice, of course, requires continual and specific feedback, and that's where the coach or teacher comes in. Todd, obviously it's important that your students that you're working with get some good feedback from you on their practice as well as their general play. So what do you try to do to give them, that sort of feedback when they come to you, whether it be for a lesson or even after a lesson? Do you sort of have something in place that you do to give them that feedback to help them go out there and practice better? Or if they're not doing things that you feel are going to be conducive to improving their game, what kind of feedback do you give them there?
Well, everybody's so different. At that point in time, you just want to make sure that that person is doing what's best for their game, and that's pretty general answer. But I don't really have any specifics for that, other than I'm just an encourager as a coach. I'm just going to encourage them to get out there and do something every day, and I really want the practice to be short and sweet, but I want it to be very focused practice. So I want to know how long they're practicing, and if I feel like it's actually too much or from the same spot too long, I'm definitely going to get on them about that and change that. But really just encourage them about practice. It's just encouragement, because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it doesn't go well. But just, just want to encourage them along the way.
Yeah, I think that's important. You can get too technical sometimes with the feedback. Obviously you have to explain to the students if they're not doing certain things correct, or if they're out of alignment, or if their posture's not correct. But they don't always want to hear that. Sometimes just some good old-fashioned encouragement can help them sort of plug through. Speaking of Trent, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your website, because it really sort of falls into place with it. This is a great opportunity, really, as I mentioned earlier, not just for students, but also for coaches. Those that are familiar with your book will understand a little bit better, but for those of you not, Trent, if you want to just take a moment or two and just explain about this website, how they get to it, and the general, again, the idea of what the purpose of the website is.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. It's called golfscrimmages.com, and most people are familiar with the word scrimmage, so we kind of put scrimmages in the title there, golf scrimmages, and that's what they are. It's about moving and shifting your practice sessions from mechanical to golf-like and realistic and competitive. And if you don't do that, you're just not going to succeed very well on the golf course. You've got to be able to make it more realistic, and this goes hand in hand with mental, physical, emotional, all those gamuts that fall into place on the golf course. So, in short, we've got a couple dozen games on there that go from driving games to hitting more fairways and more greens with irons, all the way down to up and down games and chipping, kind of a mental picture. And you enter your score into the system. The system tracks your score, your practice stats, so it shows you how well you're doing over time. If you're a member of a golf academy or a team, you have private leaderboards. So the University of XYZ can have their own private leaderboard, so their coach and all the players can see each other's scores for certain games. If you're not a member of a team or under a coach at a golf academy or even at a private club, individuals can sign up, and the pricing is very low. I wanted to make it very open-ended for anyone and any school or college that had a lot of funding or not a lot of funding to be able to say this is a no-brainer. But everybody on the site, their scores go right to those leaderboards. And again, if you're a member of a private club, or if your teacher, your coach signed you up, or your college coach or high school coach signed you up, you also get private leaderboards. And what's cool with that is you can filter those leaderboards based on handicap, gender, type of golfer, if you're a junior or an adult amateur or a professional or a college player, and really kind of see what other players are doing. we add in there, how you're doing over your lifetime average, what your trending averages are, which is just an average of your last 3 scores. So some remarkable stuff. The feedback I've gotten from great sports psychologists like Dr. Rick Jensen and other great coaches around the country has been very, very inspiring, I guess, to me, and heartwarming, and I've been very, very fortunate to hear what has been said. So I'm really looking forward to it. We basically just opened the doors on it, so it's rock and roll, ready to go.
Well, I can tell you from my experience, which was obviously very brief. I just had a look at it here just the other evening, and what I liked about it is, for those that may be not familiar with some of the specific games that you're offering or haven't had the pleasure of reading your book, you actually have a video for each of them that sort of demonstrates what it is they need to do for that specific and sort of their agenda, if you will, for that specific game. And what it does is 2 things. First off, it gives you some other options for practice. It allows you to be a little competitive with some of your, as you said, if you're on a team with a college or school, high school, whatever, you can be a little competitive and keep real-time tracking of the results. But it's also a great tool as well that the coaches or teachers out there can, encourage their students to take part in, and say, look, here's a list of some great, great games that you can be doing away from our sessions, and be able to practice and, with your foursome or what have you, or just on your own, and have a little fun along the way, and be able to keep track of the results and see how you're doing, and be able to, see your improvement as time goes on. And then it also, with that competitiveness, helps you kick it up a notch a little bit. So it's a great idea. I really liked it, and I can see see it doing very well.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's actually a way for teachers, golf academies they can actually make money on it, and they can buy say they've got 20 students they want to sign up, or 10 or whatever it is, and
right.
They can easily double their money on what they would charge each student. And like you said, it just preps everyone for mentally and all the emotions that we go through. We're trying to string good shots together on the golf course, and you've got to stop stringing 7-irons together on the range to be able to do that successfully on the golf course. So that's what all the games are about. And like you said, there's a kind of a text description and a video describing each one, and it's very user friendly. And
yep.
I look forward to seeing its progress through the years.
Yeah, I think it'll do very well, and certainly complements the book. It just brings really what you had, as you said, what you had in the book. It brings it into sort of that virtual format that really a lot of, especially the younger generation, they don't. Our generation a little bit more, at least mine, anyways, didn't mind reading books and things like that. But the younger generation wants to have everything at their fingertips, so this gives them an opportunity to be able to do that and be able to look at things in real time. So it's a great job, Trent, and I wish you much success with that. And that's golfscrimmages.com, correct?
That's it. Yep. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Todd, looking at my information for my guest coming up. Todd, I know that you're getting ready, as we talked off air a little bit, to wind down, because you're, of course, a little further down in Florida, so you're kind of winding. But anything coming up for the summer for you? Are you going to be playing in some events, or what have you got cooking?
Well, yeah, my main role is to get the golf operation of Hideaway ready for next winter season. And so I'll be spending a lot of time doing that. But I do have some summer things going on. We still have some people around, so do some clinics and some events and things like that. And this is a time for me to kind of rest a little bit, but also is to get better at my craft. And even though I do run the golf operations, a big part of my role, and had success teaching as a head professional, so I teach quite a bit. So now is my time to get my knowledge a little higher on fitting and teaching and coaching and all the things that go into making players better. So, I look forward to that, trying to get to another level of TPI and just try to get as smart as I can about coaching golfers to be better, really.
Yeah, and that's really what we all want to do, is we want to be able to give our very best to all of the students that we work with. And I can't think of two better guys to handle that task. Trent, Todd, thank you very much for coming on Coach's Corner panel tonight. Trent, again, much success with the new website and that, and I'll certainly do what I can to help encourage not just the professionals but also some of the listeners and that to go and check it out, and hopefully some of them will jump on board. And Todd, as always, thank you very much. Great job tonight on the panel discussion, and I look forward to having you guys back on another show.
Thank you very much
Thanks,
for having me.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
all right, have a great evening, guys.
So much.
You're welcome.
You take care.
All right, that was Trent Warner and Todd Elliott, and had a great Coach's Corner panel tonight. I want to thank the guys, but time to move on to my special guest tonight. Got a great guy coming on here. He actually called in a few months ago, and I had another guest on the show. It was a friend of, and wanted to say hello, and ultimately ended up in him coming on the show tonight for a little bit. So let me just read a little bit. It's Leigh Taylor. He's a PGA Master Professional, teaching up in Berwyn, Pennsylvania at the Golf Galaxy Devon. He's, as I said, a PGA Master Professional, which is the highest classification in the PGA, and he's actually one of 350 out of 27,000 PGA organization, and he's one of 6 in the Philadelphia PGA. Also, some of his highlights: he's an instructor in the Golf Channel 6 Series television special, How Low Can You Go? He's a member of the PGA President's Council, Growing the Game, and awarded the PGA President's Honor Society, as well as awarded the Middle Atlantic PGA Junior Golf Leader, nominated to the Philadelphia PGA Teacher of the Year for several years, I believe 9 altogether, from 2005 to up to 2014. He's a top 50 kids teacher by U.S. Kids Golf, and he was awarded the National Golf Foundation Public Achievement, certified club fitter for Ping, Titleist, Cobra, Callaway, TaylorMade, Nike, and Mizuno, and you name it, he's got it. And certainly many other accomplishments. But let me bring him on, and we'll talk a little golf with Leigh Taylor. Good evening, Leigh, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hi, Ted. Good evening to you.
I could have kept going on there, but I would have used up all of our time just reading out all of your accomplishments. So I had to cut it a little bit short. But welcome back to the show. You were on, as I mentioned, a couple of months ago. You had called in and talked a little bit, and here you are. You're on the show.
All right. Well, I'm ready to rumble. Let's get started.
All right. Let's talk about club fitting. That's an area that really doesn't get talked about as much. First off, who should get fit? And what's the process for getting fitted properly? How does somebody that needs to get fit, how do they go through the process? But first off, who should get fit when it comes to clubs?
Well, that's an easy answer. Everyone. Think of it like playing baseball.
Right.
The 9 positions. Everybody's got a glove. Does a catcher use a first baseman's mitt, and does a first baseman use a catcher's mitt? Of course not. Second baseman's got a smaller glove to turn to. Pitcher's got a bigger glove to protect him or herself. So the same thing applies actually to golf. You could use tennis rackets, skiing equipment. It just goes on and on and on. So everyone should really get fit. Now, the interesting part is, how about the beginning golfer that's never played golf before? It's going to be difficult to fit that person exactly correct because they don't really know what they're doing, and they're going to get some golf instruction. And the golf professional should hopefully work with the basic fundamentals, grip, posture, and alignment, et cetera, et cetera. But the person wants to buy golf clubs. If the person is unusually tall or unusually short, my suggestion is let's just get some golf clubs that don't cost too much money and play around with them, and then they could be retrofitted later on. I would hate for that person to go and spend an exorbitant amount of money and get fit, and then all of a sudden changes are taking place during the next several months, and then they don't fit, and now they got to go get them readjusted. So that's kind of my take on that. Now, as far as a more advanced player, intermediate golfer, again, everybody should get fit with every single golf club. And the USGA allows us 14. They all should be fit.
Yeah, and that's true.
Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is that's true. A lot of people don't realize that. They think it's a simple process, and it's really not. There's a lot involved to it. I mean, you have 14 clubs in the bag, and you really need to be fitted properly from the driver right down to the putter. And a lot of people don't look at that. They a lot of times will buy things off the shelf, and they figure that's, they like the look and they like the style, and they think they're going to be pretty good, and they get out there and they're hitting shots all over the place, and they can't understand why. And again, it depending on their size and obviously abilities, there's a lot of factors that go involved in being fitted properly. And I want you just to share a little bit about what you look at as a club fitter when you're eyeing up a student. What are some of the first things that you get them to do to be able to put your assessment together and having them properly fitted?
Well, very good. I have to give a shout out to one of my mentors that I had the pleasure to meet in 1977, a person by the name of Ralph Maltby. And he is, to me, one of the best gurus of club fitting and club repair that the industry's ever seen. I could be mistaken, but I think that he was voted several years ago one of the most top 50 influential people in the golf industry. So that's high marks. His company, Golf Works. And,
right.
His name is Ralph Maltby. He's not related to Roger Maltby. And he's one that has written countless number of books that help fitters along with golf professionals. So as far as going about the process, basically 4 steps. The person who's doing the fitting should interview the person who is interested in getting fit. Just ask several questions, such as how often are they going to play? What kind of commitment are they going to make? Are there any injuries? If they do play, some golf that they have a specific pattern, for instance, the ball is going to the right. Those are kind of questions that the good fitter can start processing and come up with a solution rather quickly before the person actually starts to hit balls. The second step would be, to have a golf club evaluation. If they already have golf clubs, let's go check them out. There's a lady by the name of, I believe her name is Stina Steinberg,
yes.
worked for Golf Digest.
Mm-hmm.
She actually went to, I worked for a company called Golf Galaxy. It's all across the country. And she went to a Golf Galaxy store up in the Northeast, and she had her clubs evaluated. And the PGA professional there interviewed her and found out what she was doing and started taking specific measurements, the lengths of the club, the lie angles and the loss. And when he got down to the 8 and the 9 iron and then the pitching wedge, they were very close to the same. And she said, well, that explains that because that's, I'm hitting the ball about the same with these 3 golf clubs. So there's a good example of making sure that, you evaluate the club. And then number 3 is the person needs to hit golf balls. Ting Golf Club Company out of Arizona is a fantastic company. They basically were the first ones to come up with a fitting system. And what they did, they had a reference guide where you would stand up and you take a measurement from your knuckles down to the floor, and it gives kind of a guideline of what color code you should have as far as the lie angle and also the lie angle. Well, people need to understand when they go online, even today, and I hear it all the time, that's just a preliminary guideline. There's only one way to get fit, and you have to hit golf balls or you have to hit putts. Don't do it by a static measurement. It has to be a dynamic movement. Dynamic means movement. And fourthly, then it's the fitting recommendation by the fitter. So at that point, you've done your due diligence, hit some balls, let's check it out. And I suggest strongly a launch monitor to be used. Let's talk about using a launch monitor for a couple of things. I was listening in a little earlier in the time that I came on the show and listening to Todd and Trent. And you mentioned something about ball fitting. Should it be done? I think that it should be done. Why not?
Yeah.
Are golf balls all the same? Of course not. There's 2 things that I would like to bring up as far as golf balls. Number 1, use a launch monitor for that. Test different balls. Find out which one works best for the driver, which one works best for chips, pitches, and also putts. Now, for myself, I played golf today at a private golf club, and the greens were a little bit on the slower side, and I was having difficulty getting the ball to the hole on putt. So I just changed balls. I went to a little bit harder ball instead of a very soft ball.
Right.
And then right there, I didn't have to change my stroke. And the same thing applies, if I'm on a very fast green, I'll use a little softer ball. I can still use my same stroke. So those are the things that I like to bring out regarding the ball fitting.
Right, and that sort of went to what I was alluding to when I had, talked about that as well. And I said, your conditions sometimes can dictate what you're going to play. Climate can certainly affect the ball. As you found out today, the greens were a little bit different than maybe what they might have been at a different time, and just a simple changing of the ball was able to alleviate that without having to change. See, this is what a lot of people, I think, make the mistake, is they end up changing when they're finding a difficulty in their swing or what have you. They start making all kinds of swing changes, and the next thing they take what might have been a very simple fix, and now they've made it more complicated by changing everything else. And you found yourself, just through making a slight change, that you were able to continue on with your round and see, obviously, immediate improvement.
Correct. If I didn't mention this, I'd like to make sure that I get this across again. Because most of the listeners are going to be the intermediate and the more advanced golf. I really feel strongly about using the launch monitor about what we call gapping analysis. They need to hit their driver. They need to hit their 3-wood. They need to hit 5-wood or 7-wood, hybrids, all the irons, and find out, is there a major gap between, let's say, a 5-wood and perhaps a 4 hybrid? Or is there much of a gap between their pitching wedge and a sand wedge? They should consider a gap wedge between the pitching wedge and the sand wedge. They need to find out how far they hit the ball, and the best way to do it is using a launch monitor. And that way, the consider can help make the best decision for them.
Yeah, I think with the technology that's available today, I think the more tools that the professional has, and particularly a club fitter has, in their arsenal, I think it just makes for better decisions, not only for the club fitter to be able to advise their client, but also for the person on the other end to be able to see the results, and as opposed to just trying to visualize in their head. Club fitting has changed a lot over the years. By today's standards, there's so much more, as you just mentioned, technology and that available to help them in that process. Let's talk about also, Leigh, a little bit about some of the differences between clubs. Obviously, you've got your in your irons, as an example, you've got your forwards and cast, graphite shafts, steel shafts, that sort of thing. What is generally the difference between the two? Let's start with the irons. And if you're advising, say, a newer player, what are you going to talk about? What are some of the things that you're going to discuss with that individual when they're looking at maybe making a selection about what they want to purchase?
Could you ask the question regarding someone speaking, me talking to a tour player? Is that what you said?
No. I'm sorry. I said to maybe a higher handicapper.
Oh, higher handicapper.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I would show them and educate them a little bit about something called MOI, which stands for moment of inertia, and that's basically trying to get the golf club to have less twisting. And by doing that, you can add extra material to the back of the golf club. So take, for instance, a golf club from 1965 and add more weight back of the golf club. The golf club obviously becomes bigger and weight goes down low. You're lowering the center of gravity. You're making the horizontal center of gravity move further back. That's going to make the golf club more forgiving for that person. As far as forged versus stainless, I really believe there's a misconception there regarding the two. The marketing people of all the golf companies are going to say, if you're a player, and I'm going to define what a player is. I'm not sure exactly what a player is. We all are players. Some people are players, but we're players. And
right.
The lower handicapper, let's consider that person somebody from plus handicap 0 to somebody that's maybe a 5 handicap. Those are accomplished players. There's no reason why they can't play with a stainless golf club.
Right.
people think that the Forge golf club, you can work the ball better. Well, I'm not so sure. I'm not sold on that idea, quite frankly. I know personally that I can curve a ball left to right or right to left, hit it low and hit it high, whether it's a forged or a stainless cast club. Doesn't make any difference to me. Now, I will say that as far as steel is concerned, yes, the forged is a softer material. It's a softer steel than, say, a 431 stainless steel, which is harder, and you're going to get more of a feedback. So, you know, if that's an advantage for somebody, if they like that, fine. Myself, that scorecard, as far as I know, doesn't ask me if I'm playing with the cast club or forged. It just wants to know what the number is. And I feel like a club that's going to be forgiving enough, that looks appealing to me, that gives me the feel, but certainly gives me the performance, because performance to me is the number one factor. That's what's going to work. So as far as forged versus stainless, you know, I just feel like, you know, if you really like the forged feel, go for it. If it doesn't matter, you know, look at the price and look what's forgiving and look what performs best. Use a launch monitor, as I said. As far as graphite versus steel, thank goodness that the companies have been able to do a great job in the last several years of reducing steel shafts. Probably about 25 years ago, I developed tendonitis in one of my elbows. Right. And a friend of mine that's listening, make sure you don't start taking 8 extra strength Tylenol before every round you play or practice, because it will tear up your stomach. So don't do that. Get cortisone shot, maybe 1 or 2, and that should help. But anyway, graphite is actually a material that is just a softer type of feel as opposed to steel. That's why we don't see the old wooden Wilson Jack Kramer tennis racket anymore. They came out with a fiberglass shaft, and that didn't go over real well. And then we got graphite, and graphite was not that well received by the better player because the graphite wasn't very stable during the golf swing. And then graphite became very good. And people think that graphite is not very good. Well, because it's not stable. Well, wait a minute now. Let's take a look at every PGA Tour player and every LPGA Tour player and every senior tour player. Are they playing with graphite in their drivers? Yes, they are. And
sure they are.
So, you know, then that's the one that you swing the fastest. So if you're going to swing it fast, it better be stable because they got to hit the ball between the trees. I feel like there's a misconception there a little bit too. Graphite is very good if you get a good graphite shaft, and now that steel, you can get a lot lighter steel shaft in your irons. That's going to be very helpful. So you can do things now with steel that you couldn't do years ago. So a lighter shaft does help a lot of people.
Yeah, the technology has changed so much. Again, in equipment, not just in, as you mentioned, in the forged and cast clubs, but also the shafts that are going in. The technology has changed so much particularly in this last decade, that now really the quality is so high that really this is why you see, as you said, you see the pros at various tours, whether it be the LPGA or PGA or senior, are playing graphite. The quality is just so much better now, just because of just a continual development. Same thing. That's why the balls have changed so much over the years. Leigh, let me ask you something about club repair. You know, obviously there's a time when maybe reshafting might be and gripping the clubs. How does a person know? Let's talk about, again, not your tour players. Let's talk about your mid to high handicapper. How do they know when it's time, if at all, to reshaft a club and or regrip their clubs?
Well, usually if you don't store your golf clubs outside, the golf shafts will be in good condition, and you don't slam your trunk on them. The shafts would be fine. But I'll get a little bit deeper in the shaft in just a moment. I think the easy kind of segue here is the regripping. I think the gripping companies will advise you, depending on how many rounds you play and how much practicing you do, approximately 40 rounds per year. Now, somebody that plays maybe 28 rounds per year, but practices 3 times a week, that's going to be more than 40 times a year when they're actually using their golf clubs. I myself probably play about 25 rounds a year, and I'll change my driver 2 to 3 times a year. I'll change my wedges 2 to 3 times, and the putter perhaps one time. And the rest of them, for me, and I don't really practice like I used to, that should be fine. So maybe, people can get an understanding there. But, if they're not sure, bring it in to someone who knows what they're doing. And I have to do a shout-out to my company, Golf Galaxy. I don't own it, but, we're so blessed to be trained by like Ralph Maltby and the people that work there. Brett Lindsay's another one that's so good, very helpful to us to gain that knowledge. As far as the reshafting, it's interesting. A person I've had several times, a person will come in and they say, "I'm not hitting my short irons too well today." One hand they have the brushy shaft, the other hand they have the club head. And I said, "Yeah, you're right about that. You're not hitting your short irons too well." And they want to buy a new club. I said, "No, you don't need to do that. We can save you much more money, and we'll just reshaft it for you." And they're not even aware of that. So that's interesting. The same thing with a driver perhaps is not performing very well. Using a launch monitor and a person who knows what they're doing, fitting them, can look at specific numbers on a launch monitor and try to get the ball flight to a certain degree of launch, and also the spin is extremely important as well, and trying to increase the ball speed to give you the end result, which is carry and distance. Different profiles in graphite shafts vary. So you really need to do your due diligence to test these golf clubs out instead of just going and buying a golf club. I mean, people buy golf clubs on eBay. "Oh, I got a great price." I said, "Yeah, you do have a great price, but you just wasted your money because these golf clubs don't fit you. Now what are you going to do?" I didn't think of that. Didn't know any better.
Right.
All right. That's time to wise up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's so true. A lot of people, I think, don't understand the importance of being fitted properly, and I think that's really what it boils down to. They've heard about it. Some of them have kind of haphazardly, thought about doing it, but the truth of the matter is it can affect how you play a lot more than people realize, and I think it's important. And this goes back to, a question that I want to ask you about really getting to know your pro. It's really you're building a business relationship with the individual, whether it's a male or female, because they're there to really help you. And these are some of the things that you should be asking, the person. It needs to be an interview process. So what are some things that if you wanted to advise, say, again, we'll take a new golfer out there that's just wanting to learn the game, what steps should they be taking to finding themselves, number one, a person to work with, and what are some of the questions they should be asking them?
All right. Well, without stepping on anybody's toes.
Go ahead, Steph.
When you're an assistant golf professional, you haven't been around the block enough to really have the wherewithal to give outstanding golf coaching knowledge. My gosh, I've been doing this since 1976, and there's an old saying that I just never forgotten: "He who dares to teach should never cease to learn." And I've never forgotten that saying, and I always want to get better. Is my knowledge going to increase greatly each year? Of course not. But my communication skill may get a lot better, because what I say to one person isn't going to work with another person. So I've got to be able to spin the same premise several different ways. Yep. And I think that the golf professional, man or woman who's got more experience, would be the way to go. It might cost a little bit more money, but I think it's worth it. Now, how to do that? Well, you got to make some phone calls. And if you don't live near a Golf Galaxy, I feel sorry for you. There's a moving company that I'm sure you can hire and find a Golf Galaxy and go move there, and you'll get some expert help. I don't know if I really answered that question very well. That's a difficult question to, who can you trust?
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Well, the key word really, Leigh, is it's a relationship, and it boils down to this. It's like any business relationship or any personal relationship. There's sort of in an early period getting to know one another, and you need to ask questions to learn from each other. When you're building a relationship. So in the case of the student, he or she needs to be asking questions of that professional. And don't be afraid. Some people are afraid, well, I don't want to go and take up that person's time, and then if I don't, feel comfortable with the situation, be looking for somebody else. It's kind of like going to a car dealership. Unless you have something specific in mind, you don't like to sort of go around to 2 or 3 dealerships because some people feel a little guilty about doing that. But, the truth of the matter is, if you want to learn to play good golf, you have to be compatible with that person. So there's questions that need to be asked, and there's a relationship that needs to be developed. And then once you find the individual that you feel comfortable working with, then you need to pay attention to what they're telling you. You need to make sure, number one, that they're also listening to you. Would you agree with that?
Of course, Ted. And you bring up interesting points, and I think using the car dealership kind of segues to me. If I was doing my due diligence and I want to have a list of doctors, as I get older, perhaps, I might have prostate problems or cardiac problems. I want to find out who the best doctors are that I can go to, that I can count on. So I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to start asking a lot of people. And if I keep hearing the same name pop up, I'm going to feel comfortable and confident in my choice. So you really got to reach out and ask questions, find out what kind of relationship that you can build. And once you do that, the golf professional and the student, it's going to be a friendship. And every client that I work with, my heart bleeds for every one of them. I'm very passionate about helping them. And I'd like to say that every person that I've ever worked with over the years, and I give approximately 1,000 lessons a year, and I've been doing it for a long, long time. I'd like to say that I saved every one of their lives, but I didn't. There's been a couple that I just couldn't do it. And I can tell you, for me, when I'd go home at night, it would bother me. I said, what am I going to do the next time I see this person? I've got to get that person to do what I want them to do. And but fortunately, I've been very lucky, I guess. And I do my due diligence. I work hard in trying to make everybody the best they can be, because that is their goal, and that's my goal too, because that's going to be the word of mouth advertising that I want. But you can also Google the person's name, and maybe you can find some information about that.
Right. It's interesting. You mentioned something, an earlier point about really, and what you were alluding to was experience, and it's true. I mean, there's certainly a lot of great young instructors coming up, and certainly some very, experienced, even some of the younger ones that are experienced coming up, but nothing really beats experience. And I think that it's not just a matter of being knowledgeable about the sport and knowledgeable about the equipment, but it's also being, as you get older, I think there becomes, it's hard to explain. I remember somebody telling me this years ago that I worked for. He said to me, Ted, he said, as a salesperson, he said, people really don't start to take you serious until you get to a certain age, because they don't feel you know enough. And if you're a 20-something, and again, I'm not trying to step on toes. I think I've had a lot of great young guys and gals on here, but I think there is something to be said for experience. And if you're a 20-something-year-old teacher professional and you've got somebody in their 50s, 60s, or beyond taking lessons, sometimes they're going to look at you with a little skeptical, like you haven't been on here, on this earth very long, and you're trying to explain something to me. And some of them are very gracious, but some of them, I'm sure deep down in their psyche, they're thinking to themselves, this guy hasn't been doing this long enough. How is he going to be able to help me? There's a certain bias, if you will, about that. Do you agree with that a little bit?
That's just human nature, Ted. Yes, I do agree with that. But you've got to start somewhere.
Sure.
As far as a professional, and you're right. thank goodness we have video equipment these days, and the PGA of America does a reasonably good job of trying to promote the golf professional and give them opportunities to become better teachers. And it certainly wasn't like that when I first started coming up.
Right.
It took a long time, to achieve that. A lot of trial and error, but a young person, they're just not going to have a wherewithal on most cases, not all cases,
sure,
but most.
Do you think, Leigh, that some of the, and again, this is not to criticize any, area or anything, but do you think sometimes some of the professionals get too caught up in the technology?
I don't feel that way. I would say that if you're, for the listeners out there that are going to play at a public golf course, I would go to the head professional first. That'd be my first choice. And make sure they're a PGA member. Anybody can be a golf professional, but not everybody can be a PGA professional. There's a big difference. So find a PGA professional, that's the head pro. Have a conversation. You got to be interviewing that person. Okay, how much time does the person spend giving lessons? Because some people, they have jobs where the head professional is not able to get away to give golf instruction. It's got to be more of a manager on site. It has to do purchasing of the merchandise, manage golf tournaments, all of this different various things that a PGA professional has to do. Then that person's not the right person, not the right fit for them. All right, we'll find out, who do you recommend? If you recommend somebody on that person's staff, interview them too.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's important that there has to be a communication dialogue between both parties. The instructor obviously wants to learn as much as he or she can about you, the student, but conversely, you need to understand about the instructor as well. You need to understand what experience they're bringing to the table. You understand how they're going to be able to help you, and it's not just a matter of helping you to hit the ball more solidly. It's what things. I think the first question you have to ask yourself as a student is, what do you want from the game? Are you just somebody that's out playing for a recreational, or are you looking for somebody that to be somebody that wants to play at a more serious level? And if that's the case, once you've established what you want from the game, then it helps narrow the gap of where you're going to go and find the help that's going to best suit your needs. And you need to make sure that coach is listening to what those needs are. Because a lot of times I think this happens, and this happens at all levels, if we're going to be honest here. I think sometimes, and that's why I was saying about the technology, it's not just technology, but sometimes I think the instructors may impose what they feel should be happening on the student and may not necessarily be listening to what the student really wants. And that's something, too, we have to be careful of, I think, when we're working with our students, is we have to make sure are we meeting their needs? It's not just about hitting better shots. It's what do they want to get out of the game? And is what we're doing helping them achieve that, or is it perpetuating our own goals and our own ideas? And that's something, too, I think we have to be careful of a little bit. Leigh, I wanted to ask you as well. Sorry, go ahead.
For just a moment. There's also one other little thing that I'd like to add. If the person has a business relationship with a PGA professional and likes the result of what's going on, it's not a bad idea to give a teaching professional a gift. It's okay to do that. And money is nice as a gratuity, but a thoughtful card goes a long way. It doesn't have to be handwritten; it can be typed. But just something like that, or a couple of movie tickets, or dinner somewhere. You've got to. You're building a relationship, and that's in that relationship. Not meaning that we have to be bought out, but
no.
I just think it makes it a win-win situation, I think.
Well, I think it's something that's been lost. I know that Brian Dobby, who is from New Jersey, you may know he's a PGA professional has started using a service, if you will. It's online, but it's called sendoutcards.com. and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, Leigh, but he's been using that, and he's going back to sort of the old school, if you will. We're all sort of wrapped up in emails and texting and all this kind of stuff. And what Send Out Cards does allows him to customize a card, maybe put the course on there or his picture or what have you, and he sends out thank yous to his students or reminders of things coming up. And, it's just a way of sort of, and, so his students will get something in the mail, and it's, this is, a little different. And it just sort of gives it a little bit more of a personal touch. And again, it's typed and it's not all handwritten, but nevertheless, it's still a way of communicating a little bit differently, a little more traditional way than what some of the newer ways are. And sometimes I think that's nice. I've actually received a few from him for, coming on the program, so I appreciate that. But I agree with you. I think it's nice that, if the student can maybe give something back to the professional besides just money for the lesson, I think, that certainly goes a long way in building that relationship. Leigh, I want to give you a few moments here just to talk also about, I know that you do some work through Golf Digest as a course. You're on the course rating panel. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. Tell us a little bit about how that works. How do you guys sort of come together, and how do you rate courses? What do you look at?
Okay. Well, there are approximately 1,100 Golf Digest magazine course rating panelists. None of us get paid to do that. It's all gratis. And the Golf Digest magazine, they have a listing of golf courses that want to be evaluated as candidates for top 100 golf courses.
Sure.
And the main one would be the best in the state. Not all best in the state are all top 100 golf courses. So the magazine prepares this list and sends it to the 1,100 panelists. And we can go play any of the golf courses throughout the country. We're not limited to just the area.
Right.
And that's what we have to do, and we have to make sure that we continue to do this. I think that something like about 8 golf courses a year is about the minimum that we have to do. And we do have to do top 100 golf courses just to keep up, to make sure our knowledge when we compare a newer golf course, let's say that it opened up in 2013, that we're not necessarily you are comparing it, but you're not comparing it to something that was built in 1926. There are some criteria that we go by, and some of the criteria would be shot values. So I need to define what the heck a shot value is. Shot value is just reading from Golf Digest. It's a variety of risks and rewards that tests accuracy, length, and finesse without overemphasizing anyone's skill. So, for instance, as an example, 2 of the best golf courses in the country, Pine Valley and Augusta, 2 fantastic golf courses. As an example, Pine Valley is regarded as a very difficult golf course. Mm-hmm. The average rating for that was 9.02. It was not a 10.
Wow.
Augusta National was rated 8.53. We were told by Ron Whitten, who is the Golf Digest magazine golf course architect editor, and he's conducted several panels along with some of the other people that are involved. Steve Hennessy is another one that's been involved. And we have these seminars, if you will, that we can attend, but it's also online as well. And what is being done, we have to fill out this criteria, which I'll go through the rest of in a moment. We send in, we play the golf course, and we're making notes, and we send our evaluation in, and it's all tabulated. And there's a person who used to work with the USGA who provides the slope system and for handicapping is by the name of Dean Knuth. And Dean has put together all these mathematical formulas and comes up with something. And so he actually evaluates the evaluators.
Wow.
And show us if we have outliers. For instance, I may have rated a golf course too high in a certain area or too low in a certain area. So he's pointing out, hey, Leigh, you're too high on this particular evaluation, this criteria. You're too low on this. You're not in the median that we're looking for.
Right.
So by doing this, it helps me become a little bit better evaluator. If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of move on a little bit with the other criteria. Playability is another one of the criteria. So how does the course challenge low handicap golfers, still providing options for high handicappers through the use of shorter lengths, alternative routes, and varied placement of hazards and accessible portions of the greens? So we're looking at that. Another criteria, resistance to scoring. How difficult, while still being fair, is the course for the scratch player from the back tees? Now, I used to play the back tees on all the golf courses. I don't anymore. I play something that is more manageable for me. But, for instance, Shinnecock, which is in Long Island, it's hosted a couple of U.S. Opens. That rating I picked up was 9.08. Again, it wasn't a 10.
Right.
If anybody remembers the last U.S. Open there, the scores were very high.
Yeah.
The design variety. How varied are the holes in terms of different lengths, such as a long hole, medium hole, short par 3s, 4s, and 5s, and the configurations, such as straight holes, dog legs left and right, hazard placements, green shapes, and green contours. Pine Valley rated 9.11, and a golf course called Prairie Dunes is 8.13. So and I still have a few more left, which I'll go in, and if I need to pick up the pace, I will.
Yeah,
but I want to make sure that it sinks into people. Memorability. How well do the design features, such as the tees or the fairways or the greens or the hazards or the vegetation and the terrain, provide both individuality to each hole and collective continuity from the first tee to the last green? So Pine Valley again, 9.27. Muirfield Village, which is one of the top golf courses in the country as well, but it is not in the top 10, ranked 8.11.
Wow.
Aesthetics. And this is one that I kind of like, because when you're doing evaluation, you can't get caught up in aesthetics. For instance, if you were playing in Colorado, where you might have maybe a flat playing surface, maybe a lake nearby, and you see snow-capped mountains, that's picturesque. Or if you're playing in Hawaii, that's picturesque if you're on the coast. So you got to be a little careful about that. How do the scenic values of the course, landscaping, water features, backdrops, add to the pleasure of a round? So Cypress Point in California, 9.48. Augusta National, which we know is beautiful when it's on television with the dogwoods and the azaleas, that's 9.19. So, nothing's a 10 here.
No.
And then another one is ambiance. How does the overall atmosphere of the course reflect or uphold the traditional values of the game of golf? Augusta National, 9.42. So if the golf course is lined with houses on both sides, I have to tell you that doesn't increase the ambiance in my mind.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's true as well. And I know there's a lot of factors, that go into that. I was always curious. I wasn't sure how they went about the process and what was sort of involved. And when I saw that in some of the notes that you had sent, I thought, well, that was something I definitely wanted to ask you, about that when I had you on this evening. But Leigh, I've enjoyed having you on the program tonight, and I would like to invite you certainly to come back on again. But also, I don't know if this would be of interest, and you don't have to answer me now. But obviously, as you know, in the beginning of the program, I have a Coach's Corner segment, and if you've got some time, I'll send you out a schedule and let you know what's available. But if you'd like to join in on some of the future panel discussions, we'd love to have you. And give your thoughts and input. I know you have a lot of experience in the game, and certainly I know that the listeners, not just the golfers out there, but also some of the other fellow professionals that tune into the program, I'm sure would love to hear it. So you're welcome to to do that as well if you'd like to participate.
I accept your invitation.
Well, Leigh, thank you very much, and again, I enjoyed having you on the show. And one thing I hate about the show is it has to end at some point, and it's always when you're in the middle of some good discussion. But I appreciate you for taking the time and reaching out to me and coming on the show. And as I said, I had a good time and enjoyed listening to some areas that really we don't always talk about a lot in golf that really do need to be focused on: club repair, getting fitted properly, and obviously getting to know your professional are some key things. And there's a lot of other things I know we could talk about, but we'll have to leave that for the next time. But and I certainly enjoyed listening to a little bit about how you go about rating some of the great golf courses around here in the U.S. So, Leigh, thank you for all that you do, and particularly thank you for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live.
Ted, the pleasure was mine. I thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Again, I'll be in touch with you, Leigh, and I'll send you out the schedule, and you can let me know if you're able to jump in on some of the coaches' corners. We'd love to have you.
Terrific. Thank you, Ted.
All right. Have a great evening. Yeah, you too. Thank you, Leigh.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. That was my special guest, Leigh Taylor, PGA Master Professional, works out of the Golf Galaxy, as he mentioned, up in Pennsylvania. Great facility up there. And Leigh, thank you very much for joining us on the program. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my other two guests on the Coach's Corner panel, Trent Warner and, of course, Todd Elliott. Thanks, guys, for pitching in tonight. And I want to thank you, all of the listeners around the world, for faithfully tuning into Golf Talk Live each and every week. I certainly have a lot of pleasure and enjoyment of having some great guests on the show and some great fellow professionals. And, of course, I appreciate all of you for tuning into the program. Thank you very much, and I will see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody and have a good week.